Hello, grade 12 students. In this video, we will be summarizing the whole documents that we have covered till now in the first semester. So let's start with chapter 1, basic mechanism of sexual reproduction. Let's have an overview about the male and the female reproductive system. So male and female reproductive system, we have the primary sexual organs. They are the organs responsible for the production of gametes and the primary sexual hormone, also known as gonads. Whereas the secondary sexual organs, they are the organs that support the functioning of the gonads during their formation of the gametes and their maturation and delivery, also known as accessory organs. Gametes. The male gamete is called the sperm cell, whereas the female gamete is called the egg cell. This will be discussed later. Hormones. The male primary sexual hormone is testosterone, while the female primary sexual hormones estrogen and progesterone. So the testis is the one of the most important organ or part of the male reproductive. So they are the site of the production of the sperm cells, which are the male gametes. Also, they are the site of the production of the primary male sexual hormones, testosterone. Testes, they are referred to as the male gonads. So pathway of the sperm cells inside the MRS, the male reproductive system, it starts in the testis, then it moves to the epididymis, then to the vas deferens or vas differentia, seminal vesicles, urethra, and finally to the urogenital opening. Now it's the female's turn. Female reproductive system. First with the ovary. So ovary, they are the site of production of the egg cells, the female gametes. Also, they are the site of the production of the primary female sexual hormones. They are called estrogen and progesterone. As such, ovaries, they are referred to as the female gonads. So tracing the pathway of the egg cells inside the female reproductive system, starting from the ovaries. So oviducts, what are the oviducts? They are called the fallopian tubes or the uterine tube. On due time, the egg cell will be released into the fallopian tube, and we will discuss this in the coming slides. The egg cell will wait in the upper third part of the fallopian tube for about 24 to 48 hours to be fertilized, and then it descends down toward the uterus, whether or not fertilization took place. Then we move from ovaries to the oviduct. Then we have the uterus. What is the role of the uterus? Uterus is called the womb, which is at the site of implantation and the development of the embryo till the end of the gestation period. Now, tracing the pathway of the sperm cells inside the FRS, the female reproductive system. So first we have the genital opening in the female. The genital opening, the sperm will enter the genital opening, then it reaches the vagina, then it moves toward the cervix, which is the part of the uterus. So we have genital opening, vagina, cervix. Then it moves toward the uterus, and this is the first four checkpoints: genital opening, vagina, cervix, uterus, and then toward the oviduct or the fallopian tube or the tube. So number 5, oviduct. To keep in mind that in the male reproductive system, the gonad testis is present outside the abdominal cavity, whereas the female reproductive system or the gonads in the female reproductive system, the ovary, is present inside. In the male reproductive system, the opening to the outside is called the urogenital opening, common to both systems, urinary system and the genital system. While in the female, there are two distinct opening, urethral opening and the genital opening. Now let's move to basic mechanism of sexual reproduction. Chapter 1, document 5, diploid and haploid cells. Diploid and haploid. You have to keep in mind these notes. What are the diploid cells? Diploid cells, these are the cells that contain in their nuclei homologous pairs of each chromosome, disregarding the gonosomes. Mainly they are the somatic, whereas the haploid cells, these are the cells that contain in their nuclei only one copy of each chromosome. They are the gametes. This is the karyotype. What is the karyotype? Every species have a specific number of chromosomes, but if two species have the same number of chromosomes, then they must be carrying different genetic information. Definition of the karyotype. What is the karyotype? It's the arranged set of paired homologous chromosomes. How they are arranged? They are arranged according to a specific criteria, which is decreasing order of size, position of the centromere, and banding pattern of each chromosome. Let's move to document 5 about oogenesis process. What is the oogenesis? Oogenesis is the process by which mother cell of gametes give rise to the haploid female gametes, the egg cells. It takes place in the ovaries starting from fetal life until the menopause. The mother cells of gametes 2N, 1Q, they are called the oogonia. These are the different stages of the oogenesis. And here we have the folliculogenesis, the development of the follicle from the primordial to the primary, to the secondary, to the tertiary, to the gametary, and then we have ovulation. We'll talk about this later. Oogenesis, we have the development of the oogonium into primary oocyte, then primary oocyte will give secondary, then secondary will give what is known by the second polar body and the zygote after moving from meiosis 2. We will discuss this in the coming slides. Oogenesis phases. Phase number 1 is called the multiplication phase. It's called amplification also, where the number of oogonia is amplified by mitosis to give several oogonia. Number 2, growth phase, which is called interphase. It's the phase of cellular development or enlargement so that the oogonia will give larger cells. So oogonia will develop to give larger cells. These cells they are called oocyte 1 or primary oocytes. Maturation phase. Meiosis. Meiosis 1 will start, but it will be blocked at prophase. All of these events occurs in the fetal life. They start there and they end there. At birth, a girl will have all of her to-be gametes present in her ovaries, and they are present as oocyte 1, blocked at prophase 1. What is ovulation? Ovulation is the name of the process that happens usually in every menstrual cycle. When hormone changes, they trigger an ovary to release an egg. Mainly it occurs on day 14. As shown here, we have the rupture of the Graafian follicle, it ruptures, and we have the release of the egg. This is known by ovulation. Hours before the first and every ovulation, oogenesis will resume. So oocyte 1 will continue their meiosis 1. So they undergo full meiosis to reach meiosis 2. And also they will stop at metaphase 2. And they are arrested at metaphase 2 of meiosis 2. So the end result from each primary oocyte is a secondary oocyte. So oocyte 1, they give oocyte 2. 1N, Q, 2 chromatids per chromosome, and the first polar body is here. Oocyte 2 is the gamete that will be released when ovulation is due. This is what's known by the egg cell. This oocyte 2 should wait in the upper third part of the fallopian tube that we call it the uterine tube, or it's called the oviduct. No fertilization within 24 to 48 hours. This egg cell degenerate and descend into the uterus. Only if fertilization occur, we continue with the phase number 4. Oocyte 2 resume meiosis 2 undergoes. It finishes metaphase 2, anaphase 2, and then telophase 2 to give a cell. Whenever it's penetrated with the sperm cell, it will call the oocyte. One N, one Q, one chromatid per chromosome. This oocyte eventually will form and it will mature into the ovum. One N, one Q, one chromatid per chromosome. Oogenesis starts in the ovary, but it ends in the oviduct. This is the process of the folliculogenesis, the development of the follicle from the primordial to the primary, to the secondary. You have the secondrilla that have a role. We'll study this later. To the cavitary and the Graafian follicle, which will be ruptured during the ovulation, releasing oocyte 2. Okay? Folliculogenesis, you have to know that since birth, oocytes 1 will be wrapped in a simple layer of cells called follicles. We call them primordial follicles. About 3-4 months before the first ovulation, when we start puberty, these follicles, they grow in size, they acquire more and more characteristics, they develop, and they give the primary follicles. So they develop from the primordial to the primary. Days before ovulation, 10 of these follicles will continue their development and they will become the secondary follicles. Only one among these 10 will progress into the cavitary or the tertiary follicle. The 9 other follicles, they will generate and they will die. Once at this stage, ovulation will be due on day 14. Oocyte 1 present in the cavitary will resume mitotic activity, continue to produce oocyte 2. As the oocyte is growing, the follicle also will mature into the Graafian follicle, the fully mature. On ovulation day, on day 14, what will happen? Graafian follicle will rupture and it will release the oocyte 2 into the oviduct. The follicular phase here will end. So the ruptured Graafian follicle will become the yellow body, which is called the corpus luteum. This corpus luteum has an important role in preparing the uterus to welcome the baby, producing hormones estrogen and progesterone, the female sexual hormones. This is where we study the luteal phase. If fertilization occurs, the corpus luteum will survive for about 3 months and later it will become the corpus albicans, the white body, which eventually will degenerate. If there is no fertilization, eventually the corpus luteum will directly become the corpus albicans. Here it waits about 3 months, approximately 3 months. Here it's directly changed into corpus albicans that will degenerate. Here we go to chapter 1, also document 6, fertilization. Fertilization is known by the union of two haploid gametes, the sperm cell and oocyte 2, giving rise to the diploid cell, which is the zygote. Fertilization takes place in the upper third part of the oviduct. For successful fertilization, a woman must be in her ovulation day or day after that, meaning that day 14 or day 15, okay? Or having healthy oviducts and healthy uterus, and also have abundant thin cervical mucus fluid that decreases the acidity of the vagina, protecting the sperm cells. For successful fertilization, a man must have normal quality and quantity of the sperm cells, healthy vas deferens or vas differentia. Stages of fertilization. First, the sperm will approach the egg. Second, the acrosomal enzymes, they will digest the jelly coat of the egg. Then the proteins will bind to the receptors. The plasma membrane of the sperm and the egg, they fuse together. The sperm nucleus enters the egg cytoplasm, and then fertilization membrane will form. And we will know what is the role of the fertilization membrane. First, we have sperm cell adherence. It's called recognition and retraction. So motility of the sperm cells is further activated once they approach the oocyte 2. They force their way through the layers of the follicular cells assisted by enzyme which is probably diffuse prior to the acrosomal reaction. Then they adhere to the layer which is called the zona pellucida. Entry of the sperm cell, acrosomal reaction, penetration, and absorption. The adherence to the zona pellucida releases the acrosomal enzymes. This process is called the acrosomal reaction. Whenever they adhere to the zona pellucida, they release the acrosomal enzymes. These enzymes they enable the sperm cells, in addition to the propulsion of the flagellum, to pass through the zona pellucida and penetrate the pericytal space. Cortical reaction, we have cytoplasmic changes, where the oocyte 2 released by exocytosis the cortical granules, the vesicles, which lead to the formation of fertilization membrane. This leads to the modification of the zona pellucida and makes it impermeable to other sperm cells. This will lead to the blocking of the polyspermy. More than one sperm will. Third step is the fusion of pronuclei and their formation. So the nucleus of the ovum will swell and becomes a female pronucleus. The sperm loses its tail and its midpiece, and its nucleus swell to form the male pronucleus. The male pronucleus and the female pronucleus they fuse in the center of the ovum after duplicating their chromosomal contents. This is what we know by the karyogamy. Now let's move to chapter 15, regulation of the female sexual hormones, document 1, the sexual cycle. The menstrual cycle of the female may be divided into either ovarian cycle or uterine cycle. Ovarian and uterine cycle. Ovarian cycle is composed of pre-ovulation phase and the post-ovulation phase. Pre-ovulation is called the follicular phase, whereas the post-ovulation is called the luteal phase. Uterine cycle is characterized by proliferative phase before ovulation, pre-ovulation, and this starts with the period or the menses, and we have the secretory phase, which is the post-ovulatory phase. As you know, the uterus is the site of the implantation of the zygote, the fertilized egg, which was produced in the ovary. And the ovary and the uterus, they should synchronize their cycles. Okay? So this about 8 to 10 days before ovulation, the uterus knew that oocyte 2 started to resume meiosis 2, and soon it will be ready to be released. The uterus will anticipate the fertilization and the formation of a zygote, so it will prepare itself for the major event. The tubuli glands will start to appear in the endometrium lining. Their role is to sustain the nourish of the embryo. So more blood vessels will start to form, so more blood, so more nutrition. What is the endometrium? It's the innermost layer of the uterus. This is the endometrium, it's the innermost layer of the uterus. Okay? So this part of the uterine cycle is known as the secretory phase, and it's under the effect of two of the main hormones, estrogen and progesterone, produced by the corpus luteum, where during the luteal phase of the ovarian cycle. So during the ovarian cycle, estrogen and progesterone they're produced in a high amount. This is the secretory phase. These are secreted by estrogen and progesterone. They are secreted by the corpus luteum or the yellow body during the luteal phase of the ovarian cycle. This will increase the thickening of the endometrium as shown here. Chapter 15, Document 2, Cyclic Evolution of the Ovarian Cycle. Cyclic evolution of the ovarian follicle, ovarian hormones, and the uterine mucosa. This is an important figure where the development of the follicle is related to the increase in the level of estrogen that reaches a peak just before ovulation. This peak will lead to the increasing in the thickening of the endometrium. So here we have the corpus luteum where secrete both estrogen and progesterone hormones. The estrogen is the one in blue, progesterone the one in pink. So this leads to the increase in the thickening. Whenever they decrease, because the yellow body is changed into the white body, the corpus albicans, and the decrease in the level of estrogen and progesterone leads to the menstruation, which occur, and then the cycle will start again. We have proliferation, thickening, ovulation, and so on. So the growth and development or the proliferation of the endometrium are due to the gradual increase in the estradiol hormone during the follicular phase of the ovarian cycle. This increase, the level is due to the growth of the follicles. So whenever they grow, they reach and they secrete more estradiol. At the end of the proliferation stage, when the hormone reaches the peak due to the maturation of the ovarian follicle, which is the Graafian follicle, which represents the main source of estradiol before ovulation. So here we have the peak. The peak of the hormone estradiol just before ovulation is due to the development of the follicle from the primordial to the primary to the secondary, tertiary, and cavitary, and the Graafian follicle. So the rupture of the follicle leads to the decrease in the level where it decreases below the peak and it's secreted during this phase, the uterine phase, by the corpus luteum and yellow body. Whenever these levels decreases, then the phase and the menstruation will occur again. So after ovulation, the uterine lace is formed. This is induced by high levels of estrogen and progesterone that are secreted by the corpus luteum in the luteal phase of the uterine. At the end of the cycle, if there is no fertilization, the endometrium is sloughed off. Then we have menses. So menstruation will occur. So if there is no fertilization, the endometrium will undergo sloughing. So it's sloughed off. So this sloughing will lead to the bleeding. So as I said, this will lead to the menstruation and occurs under the effect of the drop in the level of both hormones, estradiol and progesterone. What is the cause of this drop? Is due to the transformation of the corpus luteum, the yellow body, into non-functional corpus albicans, the white body, and the generation of the later. So secretion of estrogen is in parallel with the follicular development. So the levels of estrogen becomes maximum when the follicle becomes a mature Graafian follicle. When this rupture, when the Graafian follicle means it ruptures and bursts at ovulation at day 14, the secretion of estrogen, it will decrease. So the gradual transformation of the ruptured follicle in the corpus luteum stimulate the secretion of both hormones, estrogen and progesterone, as we said, by the yellow body. The secretion maximum level when the corpus luteum becomes fully mature, and then the generation of the corpus luteum decreases or stops the secretion of both hormones. What are they? Estradiol and progesterone.